Thank you to Square Enix for providing Source Gaming with a Steam copy of Final Fantasy XVI for review. Additionally, Stranger of Paradise Final Fantasy Origin was provided to Source Gaming for review via Square Enix in 2022. In 2022, I took my first step into the world of Final Fantasy through Stranger of Paradise Final Fantasy Origin, and what a fitting title for my situation. While I may not be a complete stranger to the franchise as a fan of Kingdom Hearts, experiencing the cultural impact of Final Fantasy VII through osmosis, and owning the Final Fantasy XIII series, Stranger of Paradise was my first time playing a Final Fantasy. I got to experience small inspired environments inspired by each Final Fantasy, ultimately leading to a story that could recontextualize the origins of the series' first title. While this experience no longer makes me a stranger to the franchise, I can't help but feel attached to that title, that it's still true. Although a Final Fantasy title, Stranger of Paradise is not a mainline entry, thus I am still a stranger. Where I'd wanted to highlight the mainline series, my duty as a stranger is to do just that, to experience the rest of what the Final Fantasy franchise offers. And what better way to start than not just the latest release, but one that happens to have similarities to my origins within the series. In September 2020, Sony began their PlayStation Showcase by revealing the next mainline title in Square Enix's legendary JRPG franchise, Final Fantasy XVI. A dark fantasy that would follow a tale of revenge, reveal the legacy of the crystals, and put the franchise's iconic summons into the hands of a chosen few. To this day, the Awakening reveal trailer stays in my head due to how well the music builds up, especially once the halfway mark hits.
On a fire. But that's impossible.
The legacy of the crystals. Has shaped our history.
The heavy voices singing, chanting, cascading into the roars of Ifrit as the softer melody of violins and vocals settles the message. A call for you to follow your destiny, to play Final Fantasy XVI, to buy a PS5. Although not a blow to my interest in the title, the fact that footage for the trailer was captured on a PC did not change the fact that Final Fantasy XVI would be heading to PS5 first, as a console exclusive, and would not see a home anywhere else until after the year of 2023. There was no doubt in my mind of what to do. Be patient. Waiting for 4 years to play a game that came out nearly a year and a half ago, was it worth it? Does playing through the entire game like this answer that for you? So let's do something special and begin with talking about specs for the game. It was not until after receiving the review copy from Square Enix that I realized that my PC couldn't play the game at all, crashing after 1 minute. In contrast, my laptop, with a slightly stronger processor, was able to run the game. The irony of this situation is that my PC meets all of the minimum requirements, whereas my laptop only meets the processor requirements. Despite this issue, I enjoyed my time with 16 at 720p 30 FPS. However, upon getting a sense of the title's optimization issues from Digital Foundry's observation, I can't comment on a factual basis of 16's performance without sounding ignorant or inaccurate. Additionally, I also have to apologize for some of my footage within dark environments. When I was playing the game, nothing looked as dark as how you're seeing it now. It was only when I checked through my footage, post-playthrough, that I realized how dark this fantasy really was. This is Valisthea, often referred to as the Twins. A region separated into several major realms, most of them sporting what's known as a mother crystal. Large bejeweled monuments through which the power of ether flows through its shards, the land, and to a certain few people. The breakdown is as follows. The Holy Empire of Sambrek, home of Drake's Head, as ruled by his radiance, Sylvester. The Iron Kingdom, home of the Ironblood, the Crystalline Orthodoxy, and Drake's Breath. The Dhalmekian Republic, a kingdom of fortunes and home to Drake's Fang. The neutral non-aggression zone and capital of the land. The Crystalline Dominion, home of Drake's Tail. The Kingdom of Walod, an isolated kingdom on the eastern land of Valisthea, home to Drake's Spine. And the land of Rosaria, seated by Archduke Elwyn Rosfield. Although not home to a mother crystal, Rosaria is the home of Clive Rosfield, his brother Joshua, and Jill Warwick, a young princess raised alongside Joshua as a sister. In addition to being the protagonist of our story, Clive and his family are royalty. His father and mother are the Dukes of Rosaria. Little brother Joshua is also blessed as the dominant of the icon, Phoenix. Unlike previous Final Fantasy titles where iconic summons such as Bahamut or Leviathan would be individual entities, in the world of 16 they're known as icons, with world-destroying powers that only select individuals can call upon. Though Clive is firstborn, he was passed over for succession thanks to Joshua's icon. However, he stands by him as the first shield of Rosaria, a knight dedicated to protecting his kingdom and his icon-bounded brother. In turn, Clive receives the blessing of the Phoenix, allowing him to command its magic without a crystal. But as soon as these promising ventures begin, they too quickly end. When a traitor amongst the ranks lays waste to the Rosarian knights and brings eternal slumber to the Archduke before his youngest son, the Phoenix awakens. Engulfed in rage, sorrow, and fear, Joshua ignites the world around him, soaring into the sky as a phoenix.
I'm counting on you, Joshua. Oh, fuck! Kill him! Now! Phoenix.
As Clive catches wind of the situation, aiming to call out to his brother, a mysterious figure appears. It casts further flame to the land as a pillar of fire erupts, awakening a second being of fire, Ifrit.
Second icon of fire. That's impossible.
With eyes set on the Phoenix, the two erupt in an earth-shattering battle that leaves Clive crying out for his brother's life, only to be given no mercy. Ifrit takes the Phoenix by the heart, destroying everything in its path in a volcanic eruption. Joshua is dead, the kingdom of Rosaria has fallen, and Clive barely survives as he's taken by invading knights.
Chin up, lad. You're going to be a soldier.
Joshua. Welcome back. Sorry. What's our situation?
13 years later, as an Imperial enslaved knight, referred to as Wyvern, Clive is put on a mission to capture, from a rival warring nation, the Dominant of Shiva. As the mission draws to a close and the Dominant is unable to call upon their icon's power, Clive recognizes them as his childhood friend, Jill.
I'll bloody do it then. Fuck.
With this in mind, Clive's turn on his Imperial commanders to protect her, and while he succeeds in their defeat, he's not enough for the remaining soldiers who commanded Jill in the first place. Cornered, lightning strikes down, covering the area in dust and leaving the soldiers unconscious, as a charming man named Sid ushers the two to safety, returns to Clive the recognition of his name and a new path to take.
And who's this fine hound I see before me?
A fine hound who saved your life, that's who.
Torgal.
Eh?
His name is Torgal.
You two acquainted? Well then, you won't mind taking him off my hands. Funny. I'd always pictured you as more the chocobo type. Clive Rosfield. Come now. Fleet as flame, fierce as a wildfire. That there was the blessing of the Phoenix. I'd heard rumors that you'd survived, but I never paid them much heed. Calm down. I didn't come all this way for your handsome mug. Now her, on the other hand, she seemed worth muddying my boots for. None the worse for wear. Still, might be best to get a second opinion. Back her up.
Not another step. I mean it.
Well, I'm not about to leave her here. Not one with a warm bed waiting. It's all right. You're welcome to join us. You do want to help her, don't you?
Sid, if we aren't back soon, Nan will have our heads.
I'll explain everything once we're back at the hideaway. Come on.
While I may have gone on, that only covers the first 3 hours of Final Fantasy XVI. We're just setting the stage, and this isn't to say I'm done with covering the story either. There's still plenty more that I want to talk about, especially when it comes to my critiques. But now that we found our footing alongside Clive, let's get into the core gameplay. Touted as the first action RPG in the franchise, Final Fantasy XVI sees you going blade to blade, fist, tentacle, spear, and more, as you traverse through the different locales and kingdoms in Valisthea. Rather than an entire world at your constant fingertips to explore, Clive and co pick their next mission or quest by selecting the corresponding area on the world map. From that point, that specific area is for you to explore, including return trips when the story calls for it. Across your travels, you'll fight many monsters and other soldiers of a world at war, but Clive's main targets of interest are other dominants and the crystals. This is where gameplay and the story of 16 further intertwine Clive and the game's cast of dominants. Thanks to having received the blessing of the Phoenix from his younger brother, Clive can tap into part of its power and cast different abilities that put him a mile above any normal warrior. Along with experience points, you'll gain ability points to unlock and upgrade other abilities. All of this allows you to rival the dominance that you'll face on your journey. Fierce battles against these primed opponents will feature cinematic clashes as you wind up tearing them down a peg by taking a piece of them.
You are but a branded! How? How did you do it? How did you even survive? How?
The answer is simple, Benedicta. He was fighting for something he believed in.
Shut up! want you dead!
We've played your games. Now tell me where he is.
Who? What are you?
Why?
Indeed, the bounds of Clive's power are ascended not just by his own merits, but by the merits of others. The strange power to take a fragment of iconic abilities from the other dominants, the player can use them to truly express how they want to control the flow of battles. As for myself, I prefer combining multiple passive AoE abilities with melee rush attacks that quickly bring enemies into a repetitious stagger. Due to the type of abilities that Clive acquires by the endgame, this playstyle ends up incredibly powerful. For a future playthrough, I can see myself doing something extremely different, as the amount of abilities truly allows for a variety of player expression and personal replayability challenges. This too is not the limit of Clive's powers, nor was it the limit of Benedicta's.
It's all right. They can't hurt you anymore. Come on, let's go home.
Is this it, Adolphus? My punishment for not listening to you? This wretched world! Deserves to die. It all deserves to die! Die! Die!
In a moment of weakness, her traumatic state calls upon Garuda, the icon of wind, casting hazardous gales and a tornado like no other, parting the land. As a figure looms in the winds, Clive rushes forward to the fate that lies ahead. A battle with Garuda and the truth that he is the one who's been looking for. He is Ifrit, the second icon of fire.
You're nothing but a monster. And I will not let you stand in my way!
With this truth revealed, Final Fantasy XVI hits the peak of its efforts to combine action gameplay with cinematic spectacle. 16's iconic battles see 2 or more dominants and kaiju-sized fights, causing ignited ground, shattered terrains, soaring beyond the skies, and severing of bodies. As Ifrit, you dish out ferocious strikes and keep at the enemy's tail with the wildfire ability. You feel the impact of every attack, not just of your own, but of the enemies, with how much time you need to recover to keep the violence going. The amount of fun I had from these instances is what makes me unsure if I wanted more of it. Due to their limited instances, they serve as the most impactful parts of the game's story and visual creativity thanks to cinematic direction and ideas for the unfolding combat. At this point, let's lean back into the angle of me as a relative newcomer to the series. As I concluded my time with Final Fantasy XVI, I found myself comparing it to my first venture into Final Fantasy, Stranger of Paradise Final Fantasy Origin. It's not because I never expected this to stand on its own. I was excited to sink my fangs into it from the start. No, it was because after playing, I couldn't help but feel that Stranger of Paradise did a few things better as an action game, and they're both being the most notable action games from one of the kings of JRPGs begs a comparison. To start, both titles see you sporting a player character with the ability to obtain, combine, and master multiple abilities. You use these to combat enemies, often with a team of 2 allies. If you need to heal or call upon assistance, you use your D-pad inputs to combine your attacks with an ally or utilize a potion. Additionally, if an enemy is downed, you can dish out a cool looking killing blow before you continue your onslaught. Although 16 supplies a hub area before you venture out into your next mission, both titles see you choosing your next destination on a map and then venturing out within that area of the world from start to finish, with a big boss at the end to cap it all off. However, whereas SOP only sees a bit of backtracking, 16 often sees you returning to some areas for missions to progress the story, and a lot. Often to the point where I was constantly thinking, how much more before we get a move on? I feel like I'm close to endgame. There are other differences in which 16 comes out worst. In Stranger of Paradise, your healing is limited to a small amount of potions you have shared across your allies, in addition to healing skills. And while 16 also limits the number of potions you can have at a time, Clive's the only one who uses them. Additionally, while solitary healing skills are lacking in 16, Clive's Limit Break regains healing with each attack dealt. My problem is about how these games treat healing after instances of loss. In Stranger of Paradise, if you lose, it's back to right outside the chamber of the boss fight, but you begin with all your healing items replenished. In contrast, 16 sets you at a checkpoint within the boss fight while also maxing out your healing items even if you began the fight with 0. What would be a challenging fight up to and including the final boss loses any sense of difficulty. While I did say you could call upon assistance from your allies for both games, the scope regarding 16 is incredibly limited. In Stranger of Paradise, even though you couldn't switch to controlling them, you could not only customize the kits of Ash, Jet, and Neon, but you could also command them to be more resilient in their attacks. Additionally, casted status spells will also affect your allies when in range. In contrast, 16 lets you command Clive and Jill's trusty hound, Torgal. While this does allow for the ability to chain together very satisfying air combos, Torgal is the only character you have limited command of. You cannot manage the equipment of your fellow allies, nor choose how they will support you in combat, nor will you receive the chance to play as them except for incredibly rare instances, and not even as the characters I believe would serve best from it. Furthermore, due to the lack of status-based skills, your actions in combat hardly affect your allies in any manner. As you progress through the game's narrative, it becomes so obvious that Clive's journey is not just one that rests on his shoulders, but the gameplay treats it as such and thus feels detrimental. I understand why 16, at least within its base game, limits the player to commanding one playable character. From my memory, I think the highest count of characters that you have as allies at once is 4 to 5. Because the switches so often, as characters have their roles and instances of when they will and won't be immediately present within the story, you would always have an alternating party. It isn't like Kingdom Hearts, where an ally is always at your side, even more within different realms. Like Stranger of Paradise and Kingdom Hearts, Final Fantasy XVI's story is about the bonds that strengthen the motivations or end goals of the protagonist. Clive's power comes from rivaling and ally dominance, support from allies like Gov and his uncle, the motivation to continue and fight to live from Sid, the hope of being able to see his brother Joshua again, and Jill, the person that's continuously by his side throughout almost everything in this journey. Final Fantasy XVI is just as much about the people around Clive as it is about him, but despite that, the weight of everything in its near entirety falls solely upon his shoulders and thus doesn't allow the other characters to shine where they could, especially for a character like Jill. She sacrifices so much for Clive, but even in the instance where it's supposed to be her big moment, the impact of it all is so weak due to the constant repetition of saying that she needs to be where Clive is, rather than being allowed to bear the brunt of that responsibility. Playing as her, or at least showing a stronger emotional connection to her goal, would make her feel way more impactful to the story as intended.
Return to Ironhome.
For what?
After learning the truth, you were given the chance to face your past. If I am to continue at your side, I must do the same.
We will face it together then.
To the end.
Come on.
I don't want to be a monster, Clive. Do you understand? I want to choose a different path, a better path. To live on my own terms. But before I can do that, I need to come to terms with my past.
And when you do, I'll be standing there with you, just as you stood with me.
Thank you, Clive. I must atone for my sins. Only then, when it's done, will the monster cease to be.
Just promise me that you won't die with it. Now, let's get some sleep. The journey back to Benamir is long, and there is much to tell the others.
I'm going to finish this, Clive. Here, use this.
To continue my criticism of 16's story, I think the way it treats the theme of bearers as slaves is also quite flippant. For instance, there's a certain point in the story where Clive comments on how bearers were treated under Rosaria. Treated better.
Please.
It's not too late, Clive. Rosaria is yours by right, and there are those that would help you to take it back. Had I the courage of my brother, I might already have done so. But that ship has sailed. You, however...
No. Forgive me, but I cannot. I fight to build a new world now. A better world. Where men can live and die on their own terms. I was raised in a nation that strove to improve the plight of bearers. Only later did I realize that spark of freedom did not arise by chance, but was kindled by my father. You would see me follow in his footsteps. And that is exactly what I mean to do.
Although I could see the intent as early within the first 20 minutes of the game as he acts kind to a bearer as a child, the fact is that the game literally calls their owners slave masters. There's also another instance where, I believe, Sid says Clive may have been a slave, but that he's a free man now. While that is true, we only experience Clive as a branded soldier of the Imperial Kingdom for about 30 minutes. There may have been a several-year gap within the game's narrative, but as that is not something we experience much of, the aim to portray Clive as anything but a royal that still has ties to his family and the blessing of the Phoenix falls flat. My earlier Kingdom Hearts mention doesn't come from nowhere. Before Final Fantasy XVI's release, the development team thanked the KH team and Platinum Games for their help on this title. You can see pieces of their involvement most strongly in the gameplay, but there were many points in the story where I found similarities, though I don't know how intentional that was. Intentional or not, Final Fantasy XVI ends up as a game where I'm thinking a lot more about the titles that influenced it, all of which were stronger and better executed in displaying its themes. To return to more positive thoughts and critique, despite my flawed experience of playing Final Fantasy XVI, I was able to fully experience the quality of how this game looks and sounds. With the introduction of the main cast, I immediately fell in love with the color coordination and layer of outfits as designed by Kazuya Takahashi. The music, as composed by Soken, is very interesting in a mostly good way. While there are some tracks that I felt don't fit the setting of 16 in any sort, they're far and few between from the tracks that I fell in love with. I'd like to share a snippet of them before we move forward, as the instant they hit my ear, I had to stand still and absorb myself in the moment. and if you love Final Fantasy's prelude theme, prepare to hear it many times in different ways. I want to say there are about 20 instances of it appearing within 16's tracks, but I'm pretty sure there was more than that. Additionally, this has been the first time in a while that I've been incredibly wowed by a game's voice cast. I can't single out any one actor, as everyone's performances were stellar, but there was one instance that synchronized me with Clive where both he and I happened to say, "Oh fuck," at the same time. Things like that helped connect me to the game's cast. As you've seen throughout this entire review, I've been playing Final Fantasy XVI at the lowest settings possible on a laptop that doesn't even meet the minimum graphics card requirements. Given a patch released amidst the writing of this review to address some graphical concerns, I think Square Enix intends to address these issues quickly. Still, given previous instances with their PC published titles, I can't say for sure. I hope they will be though, for the next time I play Final Fantasy XVI. Despite my critiques of Final Fantasy XVI, I think it's a fun time. I completely avoided side quests, and as this review copy didn't include the DLC, there will be a lot for me to return to in a future playthrough. However, I'm not sure exactly how long I'll wait until that next playthrough. The positives of 16 are strong, but so are its negatives, and even after beating it, I felt a tad unsure of my overall satisfaction. If you'd like to purchase Final Fantasy XVI, you can find a link to its Steam page below. Thank you one final time to Square Enix for providing us with a review copy of the game. Thank you so much for watching, and always remember to return to the source.